Multi-Hazards, all about protecting communities. Hello, this is the Multi-Hazards podcast, where we take a deep dive into issues in emergency management, climate change adaptation, security, etc. And the paramount goal here is protection, protecting communities. So welcome, Vin Nelson here. Today I am so thrilled to have special guests all the way from Bangladesh's International Center for Climate Change and Development, ICCCAD. And their names are Adnan Qader and Ms. Sumaiya Binte Anwar and Nafis Fuad. And I'll let them give their own intros in a few minutes, but I'll just offer a one-liner on each one of them. So Mr. Adnan Qader, he's Senior Research Officer at ICCCAD. His research interests lie in climate and water security. And Ms. Sumaiya Binte Anwar is a research officer at ICCCAD working in the Urban Resilience Program. And she's a civil engineer too by profession. Nafis Fuad, he is a research officer at ICCCAD. His main research interest is in urban climate resilience and development. And also, before I start up this interview, I'd just like to let you know that I made a big mistake in the beginning. I said the word climate refugee. No. So the right term is climate migrant, people who migrate, okay? Not necessarily the people who are seeking refuge, because refugee is a legal term. It's used in the United Nations and with various countries, and it has yet to be fully applied to people fleeing from climate change-induced events. And it's hard to boil down the reason why people leaving just solely to climate change. Could be in the future we'll see some changes in this area, but not right now. So I apologize for using the term climate refugee. No, let's say climate migrant. Somebody who flees, I guess they're all fleeing, but they're going from one area to another one. Okay, and if you want some more information on that, there's a web page. You can look it up in the search engine. Go to Let's Talk About Climate Migrants, Not Climate Refugees, and this is a UN website. So, dear listeners, it's my habit here on each and every Multi-Hazards podcast to say a territorial acknowledgement. All right? It's out of deep respect for First Nations people on whose land I am standing right now here in the suburbs of Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. So I'm borrowing this text from Kwantlen Polytechnic University, which is near me. Here we go. We work, study, and live in a region south of the Fraser River, which overlaps with the unceded traditional and ancestral lands of the Kwantlen, Musqueam, Katsi, Semiahmoo, Tsawwassen, Kikite, and Quiquetlam peoples. And there may be some that I haven't mentioned here. So these are the names of various First Nations groups around me that I know about here in Greater Vancouver, the west coast of Canada. Now, without further ado, let's get to the interview. Hello, welcome to Multi-Hazards, the podcast. Vin Nelson here with special guests. And let me try to say their names correctly. Adnan Qader, Sumaiya Binte Anwar, and Nafis Fuad. They're from Bangladesh. Now, this is kind of what they call, serendipity? Because last month, I think last month to beginning of June, for the episode 8, I had Dr. Idris Alam, who's a Bangladesh expert on disaster risk reduction, DRR. He's currently working in a college, I think, in United Arab Emirates, but he gave me lots of information about Bangladesh. So it's kind of like chance that I'm getting a lot of information about Bangladesh. I love that place. I got to go and visit it one day when COVID's over. So yes, it's time for more information about Bangladesh. So these three are at the International Center for Climate Change and Development, ICCCAD. The Twitter account for ICCCAD states that they're tackling climate change through research, capacity building, and collaboration. And in their name, it says international. So I'm so happy. I know it includes me. So there's a disclaimer I want to give to everybody. Adnan, he's from my school, the University of Waterloo in Ontario, Canada. Lucky him, he graduated from the program I really wanted to do, which was the Masters of Climate Change. The only one around, I know. And I could only do online because I was strictly online. I could only do 4 courses, so I got a graduate diploma of climate risk management. And I had to get other courses from University of Toronto, Yukon University, and blah, blah, blah. Maybe I'll study next year at Australia's Griffith University, but all online. Well, of course, everything's online. But this is like the pre-COVID-19 days. So anyways, I'm very envious of Adnan for getting that Masters of Climate Change. So we're going to see what it did to him, how it changed him. Now, also, there's something I need to mention to all my dear guests here. And I've worked for over 20 years with immigrants and refugees, both in Canada and also in Asia. So this idea of climate refugees, especially in the last few years studying about climate change, this haunts me at night, daytime too, because the world is heating up. And you look at the globe and you say, okay, all those places near the equator, all those hot countries, where is everybody going to go? So buckle your seatbelts, global citizens. We're all in for a rough ride these next few decades, and we're only at the beginning stages, but let's not get depressed. Let's take action. So let's begin the interview here. That's my little pre-spiel. So welcome in Bengali language. I think it's what, Spagotom? Spagotom? Did I say that right? Spagotom. All right.
Spagotom, yeah.
Okay, Swagatom. You have to say it more relaxed, all right? Get those lip muscles relaxed. And then it's Apnara Kemonachen is the plural formal of how are you, right?
Yes.
Apnara means all of you?
Apnara is a more formal way of saying.
Okay, well, I want to be formal because don't want to take risks, right? And so I'm just wondering, where on the global map are you? That's my first quick question. And then how are you, just very briefly, how are you all surviving this COVID-19 pandemic? Because as we say in English, it's the elephant in the room that must be addressed. So we got to mention it because this is a global like crisis. It's kind of like a meteorite, huge one just hitting the planet, knocking off course. So yeah. So where are you on the map? And then how are you surviving COVID-19?
Hello, everyone. Hello to the listeners. Well, to the answer of your question, Amra bhalo achi, which means we are fine.
Okay. You're Sumaiya, right?
Yeah, this is Sumaiya.
Okay. Make sure I got the right person.
Yep. Well, talking about Bangladesh, Bangladesh is a country in South Asia, in the northeastern part of the Indian subcontinent. We share most of our borders with India, and in addition, a small border with Myanmar.
Okay.
Like the rest of the world, we too have been hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic, and the number of coronavirus cases continue to increase as we speak, since it was first announced in early March. However, to flatten the coronavirus spread curve, the government declared a nationwide holiday, putting the business and industrial activities into a grinding halt, except the emergency services. The police and the armed forces are working alongside the doctors in the front line. Well, several industries have been hit hard. You might want to check the label at the back of the t-shirt you're wearing. Bangladesh is in fact the second largest exporter in the ready-made garments industry, primarily exporting goods to the European Union, the United States of America, Canada. This garment industry has been hit brutally as stores across Europe, USA, Canada closed down in response to the coronavirus, and many fashion brands and retailers canceled their orders of clothes, bags, and shoes worth billions of dollars from these garments factories, forcing the factory owners to close and lay off hundreds and thousands of workers. So in our country, this lockdown has become an issue of, in fact, life versus livelihood. But however, the Bangladesh government gradually reopened the garments factories, but the manufacturers are still suffering from weak global demand amid this pandemic. Big fashion brands are still canceling their orders, which is adding to the already existing plight of the textile workers. But however, several other working places like our office, we are working from home. We are trying to continue business as usual in whichever way we can through online platforms. Several schools, universities, they're taking classes through online platforms as well. But the situation in the rural area is a bit different, which do not have that flexibility to go through online platforms to continue their classes. So yeah, this is the scenario overall. I hope we reach the peak of the curve soon. I don't know when that peak will come, but yeah, this is it.
So you're surviving. You know, in my interview with Dr. Edris Alam, he basically gave me the picture that your nation is a nation of survivors because you're facing all these like cyclones, right? Not hurricanes, cyclones, and then you get landslides, and then you get floods, and like whatever, I don't know, 70% of the country floods, and you still survive. You're just still there. It's like, you can't get me up there. You shout at the sky. You're just survivors. It's amazing. So even this COVID-19, you're just finding ways to survive. That doesn't say that it's not hard. Of course it's hard. But I think your nation knows about resilience probably better than anybody on the planet. So we have a lot to learn from you, I think so. Now, Adnan, you mentioned on a LinkedIn post reply this week, I was reading it, it said the World Bank
yes, sir.
has reported an estimated 13 million by 2050 in one of their 2018 reports, but our studies go beyond one report. The estimation, as we wrote, is expected regardless of alternate livable cities or stringent adaptation measures. The number can easily go above 13 million. So now, what is this number?
So
what are all these numbers? 13 million.
I'll break it down into two different parts. So when the World Bank came up with that report, they were testing this statistical model. It's called the gravity model. And it was formulated by a Canadian. He's a professor in Wilfrid Laurier University. He came up with this model in 2013. And the unique thing about this model is that it incorporates different factors which were not taken into account long time back. These factors include food security risks, sea level rise, melting ice caps, which are not taken into account while dealing with population or a huge chunk of population moving from distant point A to point B. So this gravity model was used to predict certain number of migrants in 3 different regions. One was in Africa, the other one is in Latin America, and the third one was in South Asia. So the total cumulative number that was predicted till 2050 is 143 million people will be internally displaced or will be forced to migrate from their original homeland. So when we say the number can go beyond 13 million, we are assuming, and it's again a fact-based assumption, that we will not be able to reach the climate goals, the adaptation goals set up by the UNFCCC. And that people will not be able to adapt, and this could be for various reasons. And the most recent reasoning that has been being formulated is called the 10 insights in climate fragility. It's a jargon the German government is using, and they'll look into 10 insights on different fragility risks that can force people to move from one place to another. So according to that particular modeling, that 13 million can go above.
Right. So this is worst case scenario?
Yes, that's worst case scenario if the specific countries can't reach their adaptation goals.
Okay. Well, are we reaching the goals?
A negative example would be Kiribati. They went to international court regarding the case of migration, since most of their land are being flooded. Case for Bangladesh, we're seeing a lot of internal displacement. Case for African countries is the same, that people who wish to move from one place to another in different parts are coming across different challenges. For example, civil war or ethnic clashes between two groups. So these are being more prominent, which affects the adaptation goals set by those particular countries. But to answer the second part of the comment which I made, there are some positives. For example, in Bangladesh, we're trying to come up with, just to reiterate, migrant has to move from point A to point B. And again, since you mentioned that I was in Waterloo, my thesis looked into migrant workers moving from point A to point B. What happens in point B? Is point B a livable city? Or point B will succumb to the problems of climate change and the city itself will become a climate prone area. So my study looked into that, and Bangladesh right now again is doing a large scale study to look into those scenarios. Okay, we get that people are moving away from the coastal belt, but what will happen to these people when they move to the secondary cities? Are those cities livable or not for the future? And Bangladesh, in terms of positive impact, those cities are being developed so that those people can move and adapt to those particular areas. So in terms of internal displacement, some countries are doing that. But again, it's a long-term effort and results are yet to be seen. So it's still at 50-50 for now.
Okay. Now, obviously, all three of you think this issue is important enough that you work now at the International Center for Climate Change and Development, ICCCAD. So I'm just wondering, what is this center?
This center, the International Center for Climate Change and Development, known as ICCCAD. It is a leading research and capacity building organization based in Bangladesh. In fact, we have just completed our 10th year anniversary.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you.
Great.
ICCCAD aims to lead a network of southern-based partner institutes in order to provide education to build long-term capacity for adaptation and resilience to climate change in Bangladesh and across the global south.
Okay.
So just to add to Sumaiya's point there, so since you mentioned what do we mean by international, we have partners across the world, especially in some countries in Africa. Uganda, Mozambique, Ethiopia are some of our big partners, and we have countries, Nepal, Bhutan. They're also part of this network we're working with to bring about capacity development for climate change.
Okay, wonderful. So now before we go too far along, who are each of you in a few brief sentences?
So my name is Adnan Qader. I'm a senior research officer at ICCCAD. I'm currently working in multiple projects. So one of my focus is on climate migration. But in terms of my research interest, I mainly look into water security and climate fragility or climate conflict research. Those are my interest areas. And at the same time, I'm a part-time activist. So in terms of running after people and telling people to believe in climate change, it's a new norm nowadays. So yeah, I do that on the side as well.
Okay. Just a quick question here. You say water security. What are you talking about? Are you talking about drinking water, like swimming pool water, water in the
So
water closet? Like which water are you securing?
So I particularly look into transboundary water conflict. So that's one of the thing, my major focus. But at the same time, I look into drinking water. So
Okay.
drinking water is a big issue in Bangladesh, for example. So yeah, that's one of my research interests.
Okay. Great. Next.
Okay, hello, this is Nafis. I am working at ICCCAD as a research officer, and
Okay.
I am also working in some multiple projects in ICCCAD, and my personal interest goes with disaster early warning system. Now I am working with developing an early warning system for landslide in Bangladesh, which is in Chittagong Hill Track area, and now I'm working in ICCCAD in a project named Off Grid, which is focused on informal slum management. Okay, thank you.
All right, that's awesome. Just a note here, in Vancouver where I live, it's on the west side of Canada, there's a company called Minerva Intelligence, and I've had a couple people as my guests from that company. So they're basically focusing on geohazards like landslides, but what they do is they put all the maps that exist for a given geographic area, they put them all on the computer, and they get this artificial intelligence. I don't know what it does, maybe a massage or churn out like a blender, making a smoothie drink. But at the end, it gives them like the best geohazard information and maps. So, yeah, I hope maybe you can collaborate with other people all around the world and artificial intelligence. It might be a good thing for what your organization is doing. Just saying. All right. The next person, last but not least.
I'm Sumaiya. I'm working in ICCCAD as a research officer in a climate-induced migration project. I have a background in civil engineering, in fact, and I share a keen interest in integrated water resource management and the overall security implication of climate change.
Okay, and you're a civil engineer, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What is that? Like, what is that, like bridge building and roads?
Bridge building, roads, the house you're living in, structures, yeah, all these kinds of things.
Okay, that's wonderful. So, I've seen how I got interested in all of you is this article that you put on LinkedIn. It was called Mogla Town, an Escape for Climate Migrants with a question mark. So that was on June the 25th, like last week. And it was written, I think, by all three of you. And you mentioned there's a climate-induced migration project about this place called Mogla Town. And I just looked at Google Maps and where it is. I think, let me see, Google Maps. It says, are you in Dhaka right now, by the way? It's the capital, right? Biggest city?
Me and Sumaiya, we're in Dhaka. Nafis is in Marmanching.
Okay. So this is 7 hours, 22 minutes by car, this Mongla, 274 kilometers. So, like, you actually went there, right?
So it's one of our projects from ICCCAD. It's one of the many projects ICCCAD does. So,
okay.
Yeah, in terms of going there, and as Sumaiya mentioned before, in terms of building capacity or understanding the different scenarios we are working in, we do travel there in periodic time to see what's going on.
Okay. So, like I'm an English teacher, so I do something called the 5 W's, right? Who, what, where, when, why, and add how. So I'm just wondering, I read this article, made me very interested, and you wrote it with such enthusiasm, like this is a great place. They've hit on an excellent idea. And because this is actually quite a tragic thing about climate refugees, there's nothing funny about it. But these people are doing something about it. They're taking action. So I'm wondering, what is that action exactly these people are taking?
Okay, before we go into that, I think
Hmm.
Sumaiya and Nafis have been working in Mongla for the last 2 years. They'll be
Okay.
able to better explain. But before we move on to there, let me clarify the definitions we use. In the Global South, we don't use the word climate refugee.
Okay.
It's really interesting that there's so many definitions for migration, especially in this sector. So the global north usually uses the word climate refugee, but
Okay.
for us, we usually use climate induced migration or internally displaced person.
Okay. Did I say that word? Climate refugee?
Yes.
Bad habit. I'm sorry. I even read lots of legal documents saying that according to the United Nations, there's no such thing as a climate refugee. I should know better. Okay.
No, no,
Bad
it's
Vin.
okay. It's okay.
It's just like bad habit.
Some nations are starting to use that. So it's a debate. It's an ongoing debate that causes a lot of people to question whether climate migration is actually a real thing or not.
Well, it is a real thing. It's just the problem with refugee. It's usually a United Nations word, meaning
Mm-hmm.
that they will accept somebody as a bona fide refugee escaping their country. So I get the point about it, but in fact, they're all the same thing because you're looking for refuge, right? But the
Yes.
legal term should be migrant, right? So we'll say climate migrants.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so who is it that went to some Mongla
Yes.
town?
It's Mongla town. Yeah.
Okay, Mongla.
Okay, so let me go into a little bit of background. Adnan
Okay.
has already mentioned about, point one from where a person moves and point two where the person goes after he moves. Well, this migration, it has happened for many years and it includes several push factors. It can be environmental factors as well as pull factors, which are in fact mainly economic factors such as jobs in the host cities where they are planning to move. While we have already talked about the numbers that millions of people will move, this we can predict with, in fact, a great certainty that many people living in certain towns will simply not be able to live there anymore because their livelihoods will be lost. And uh, what happens in Bangladesh is when people move, they generally come to the capital Dhaka, which is already very overburdened with a
Hmm.
very huge population. While Bangladesh needs to think about how to cope with these millions of climate migrants, uh, we are thinking about turning the problem into solutions to show the world that a facilitated and planned migration can be a successful and indeed a transformative adaptation for these climate-induced migrants. Now, ICCCAD has been trying to develop this concept of climate-resilient migrant-friendly cities and towns, which can become the recipients of these migrants. The program is aimed like for 10 years from now. That is we are kind of developing a climate migration program for the future climate migrants. Now, when we talk about the secondary towns, we need to think about their economic potentials and the proximity to the climate stressed regions in order to determine if those towns will actually be able to absorb this large number of climate migrants. These secondary towns should be adjacent to economic hubs, seaports, river ports, export processing zones, which can potentially attract millions of migrants who are feared to be displaced. Now coming to Mongla town, very close to my heart. This is in fact a growing port town in the country's southwest coastal region. And we are testing this theory and concept of developing secondary towns in Bangladesh through Mongla so that the burden of migrants can be spread from Dhaka to the other parts of the country. At present, in fact, two-thirds of the total population of Mongla has migrated from different districts due to the diverse livelihood opportunities the port activity provides for them. And in the next few years, The mayor of Mongla believes that Mongla will become a regional economic hubs because they're taking various infrastructural development to do that, which will be able to accommodate the more thousands of potential migrants who will be drawn by rapid industrializations in Mongla and who will be pushed by the loss of their livelihood and the agricultural land to the rising sea. I think Nafis can add more. Nafis, you want to say something?
Yes, I can hear you. Let me first state that our main objective of the study was to provide a research-based knowledge for promoting Mongla as a migrant-friendly town. So we are here using the word climate-induced migrant, and we are, as Bangladesh is a poor country, and people usually move from this coastal belt to our capital Dhaka. So Dhaka is overburdened with population pressure. So that's why our aim to developing a secondary city. That's why the migrants don't come towards the capital, then go for the secondary cities. And our target is to promote quality education with better health and housing facilities and water facilities to promote Mongla as a migrant-friendly city.
So just to add, sorry, Shinaf, interrupting. Just to add there, just for the viewers' understanding, Mongla is near the sea, so due to sea level rise, there's a large number of salinity intrusion, which is also affecting the water supply there. So another example of how different ways Bangladesh is being affected by climate change. So in a nutshell, we looked into the different areas that could be improved. At the same time, make the city, town more resilient in terms of the migrants who are traveling there to look for better opportunities, as Sumaiya and Nafis mentioned.
Wow.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Okay, Mongla is yet vulnerable to climate hazard. If the question comes to that, why Mongla city has been chosen, then let me tell you that Mongla has become one of the most important economic zone in our country, as the existence of the second busiest seaport of our country, and the area has become an economic hub due to a wide range of livelihood opportunity provided by the Mongla export processing zone. And the area is also export-oriented shrimp culture area, and in our local national budget, a huge bulk of amount was invested for this area development. So it will be easy to promote this city as a secondary climate-friendly city rather than the other, because the economic intervention has already been taken by the government. So this city has been chosen for this huge economic and proximity to climate stress region. So that's why Mongla city has been chosen to develop as a climate resilient migrant friendly city.
Okay. So this city, you said it has been chosen. So who did the choosing? You're saying the federal government?
So in Bangladesh, we don't have a federal government.
Okay.
But it was chosen in terms of our national adaptation goal. If you can recall, I mentioned that we have specific adaptation target for the country. So in terms of improving and developing certain cities, just for a background context, most of our cities are not well developed. So that's why people always move to specific areas, which Sumaiya mentioned is our capital. That's the most developed city in Bangladesh right now. Then we have two other cities in the south and in the north. But other than that, as Nafis mentioned, since this city is becoming more economically friendly in terms of, not friendly is not the right word, economic importance in terms of providing livelihood for the people, at the same time our country's GDP, that city stood out for our government. So that's why it was chosen as to reach that adaptation target for the future.
Okay, when you say there's not a federal government, I was trying to find a word to mean the central government, the people in charge of the whole country, right?
Yes. Yes.
So they chose Mongla as one of the secondary cities, or like there was someone who made that decision, right?
So yeah, we have steering committee for that particular area. It includes the mayors, and there's a network of mayors, experts, climate change experts as well as our Ministry of Environment, alongside our central government who makes that decision.
Oh. And let me tell you another thing. There is a distinction between the climate migrant and environmental migrants. So there is a pilot study in the coastal belt of our Bangladesh region, and it has been found that the hypothesis that climate migrants really exist or not. So in that case, according to the World Bank definition, climate migration happens in that Mongla area, as they define as a climate migrant must to move from 14-kilometer distance from his origin to destination, and livelihood can be the primary or secondary priority for migration, and the person who migrated must be lived for at least 9 years on the destination place where he migrated. So this kind of composition has been found in Mongla area, and people are really in our study we have come to know that people are really migrate from their area.
So just to reiterate Nafis' point, like the gravity model looks into that. So there are certain factors that qualifies a certain person as an environmental migrant or a climate migrant. So a lot of people question us. That's what happened in that LinkedIn comment. How do you define a climate migrant? Like a person can move due to multiple reasons, right? But when we look into those factors, as Nafis mentioned, that's how we distinguish between someone who's just moving to seek better job opportunities versus the people who are actually moving due to environmental or climatic stressors.
Right. And you have to look at the areas that they move from. Are those areas affected by climate change?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So you find out basically in Mongla, like where is everybody coming from and why. So, yeah, that's great. Now I'm looking at a map of your country. I'm trying to understand it. Now I know a lot of the bad things happen in the south, right along the ocean there. But everybody likes to move there because it's so beautiful, right? And you can do shipping, and there's a lot of industry there. Now, what about the middle part, like above Dhaka and the north? Like, do a lot of people live up there? Can they go there if something happens in the south, or?
Yes, that's exactly what's happening right now. So a lot of people are moving away from the coastal belts, and they're moving and are resettling in the middle part or the northern part of Bangladesh. But unfortunately, the northern part of Bangladesh are drought prone, which is a big factor for climate-induced changes in those particular areas. So again, this concept is called a double jeopardy future. It's like people are moving away from a climate impact zone to another climate impact zone, but that zone is not that much affected compared to the zone they're moving away from, and that zone might be more prone to climate-induced hazards in the future.
Can I add something to Adnan? Yeah. You know, one mindset we have found in our research among the people is that when someone is planning to move away, back of the mind, they think about moving to areas in proximity to their origin. So, a person moving from this coastal belt in the south tend to go to a different city closer to his original town, because when a person plans to move, he has to go through some networks, right? He needs to talk to people that, okay, I'm planning to move there. What opportunities might I find? Can I make a living there? So this informal network is generally made through family connections and friend connections, such factors like that. So in generally, the normal trend is a person moving from south generally moves to a nearby or adjacent town in the south, or in most cases in Dhaka, the capital.
Okay. So I'm just wondering the temperature difference between south and north, or I don't know if central is any different, but which place is hotter?
From my observation, the coastal areas are more heat up, and heat stress is also and climate change hazard, which is coming to in our country. When doing the research of Mongla, I have looked into the thermal mapping through remote sensing image, and I have come to know that from 1990 to 2020, the average temperature rises around one degree. So that's a really, really bad thing for that area, because that really hampers the local people. And when we go for the survey, it's really hard to do survey because there's so much heat, and that is called a heat stress island, Mongla. So from my observation, I have tried to visit various places of my country. From my reason, the Khulna belt, the southwestern belt coastal belt is so much hotter than the other place in our country.
Okay, so it might end up that people later, they're going to flee to the north because that's like mountains, maybe a little bit cooler. They just, they don't want to be like stuck in a sauna, right? They want to get somewhere a little bit cooler. Even, I don't know if it's the process of elimination, right? Which problem is worse, which one is better, and they have a lot of things to include for the decision, right?
If you consider that in the north the temperature is less, it's not like that actually. In the north, the average temperature is like about 40 degrees Celsius, and in Dhaka, the central, the average temperature is around like 37 to 38 degrees Celsius. So comparatively, the northern area is hotter than Dhaka. But it doesn't make a very much difference that Bangladesh is a very small country, that in the north it makes a huge difference in temperature, or in the south it's just a matter of 1, 2, or 3 degrees Celsius.
Right. Okay. It's hard to see from Google Maps, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, your organization right now, how are you collaborating with other nations and organizations?
So, as we mentioned before, so there are multiple nations we're engaging with right now. So our main partners are UK based. So it's a center called IIED. We're working with them for a long time. In fact, our Dr. Hawk, our founder, is a research fellow there. He was a research fellow there when he started the center. So UK is a big partner. Then we have countries in Africa, Mozambique, Uganda, Ethiopia. They're big partners of our country, our center. Then Nepal and Bhutan, we're working with them as well. So it's a multiple-pronged countries we're working on, and we focus on policies. At the same time, we look into collaboration-based study. So again, as Bangladesh is trying as a good example for a country which is adapting to climate change, people tend to learn from us, and they go and try to implement what they're learning in that particular area. So other than those countries, we are also working with the United States as well. And yeah, I think that's about it, right?
Okay, well, you have potential future partnerships to be made in the future. Nobody's stopping you. And it'll be great to see where your organization goes. Now, I'm just wondering, like, is there a way that local people can get involved in your organization?
Yes, there are multiple ways local people do get involved. For example, we have an ongoing youth leadership program. It's called the Rise for Climate. It focuses on youth specifically, and our center trains the youth on climate change knowledge. And a question you can ask is that most countries do that, but it's different for our country in the sense that most youth groups don't have access to formal education. And in that case, when you don't have access to formal education, climate change knowledge is least of their worry. So we're trying to bridge that gap. And our center has been trying to do that for the last 2 years. And we train the selected participants for our program in not just climate change knowledge, we also train them in the different subsector under the climate change umbrella. It could be water related, it could be SDGs, it could be migration, it could be energy. So we train them on multiple scenarios. And in terms of employment opportunities, if that's what angle you want to look into, yes, since it's a think tank. We have multiple researchers coming from different universities of our country, and they do come as visiting researchers. At the same time, we have visiting researchers from different parts of the world. We currently have a visiting researcher from India. We had researchers from Sweden, Netherlands, States. So we have multiple groups of people going in and out of our center.
Okay. And I'm wondering, you mentioned a little bit about Bangladesh government right now, but how is the relationship going with them? How do you think it's going to develop in the future in terms of taking action?
So our Honorable Prime Minister, she is an advocate. She is a champion for climate change.
Okay.
She has been doing amazing work in terms of educating and mandating that climate change knowledge should be a part of every government-based institution, including private sector. So we have policies that has been amended in terms of including climate change nomenclature into those particular documents. So, for example, our 7th 5-year plan was a big promoter of climate change problems and problems associated with climate change. That includes our water sector as well. Our country is famous for our rivers. We have 130, if I'm not wrong. 130 plus rivers in our country. So water is a big resource, at the same time a big hazard in terms of flooding risk. So in terms of looking into future climatic scenarios, our Bangladesh government is revamping every resources to cater to those problems. At the same time, the Green Climate Fund, which was released last year, I think. Again, Dr. Salimul Haq, who's our director, is a big promoter and a champion for that as well. So we're trying to use that funding to revamp our adaptation and mitigation measures for the future. So yeah, it's in terms of donors, in terms of policies, the Bangladesh government is doing a lot of work in this particular sector.
Can I add, Adnan?
Yeah.
Bangladesh is in fact one of the most proactive governments in the world in dealing with these climate change issues. Bangladesh has developed Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan in 2009, which has been implemented for nearly a decade. And now it is being revised to take it to 2030. Once the revision version is adopted, it will also be integrated into the 8th 5-year plan as soon as possible. Adnan already spoke about the 7th 5-year plan. Over the last 10 years, Bangladesh government has been putting around $100 million into promoting these actions and research to tackle climate change issues and mainstream climate change into national planning and budget. We have a separate climate change budget allocated to around 20 different ministries to tackle individual climate change issues in different ministries. So yeah, Bangladesh has been well aware of the problem for over a decade and has been fighting it very proactively.
That's awesome. So you think Bangladesh can teach the world about many things, not only, I'm just guessing here, but the policy, collaboration with other nations, and maybe there are other countries that have a similar climate, weather, and river systems, so they can be learning from you. What would you say about that?
I think we're already doing that. We have a connection of countries which we represent in ICCCD. So yeah, we do in terms of policy engagement. We try to raise our voice as a least developing countries network. We try to raise our voice in terms of the amenities we're supposed to get to cover this kind of problem we're facing right now. So as you know that the UNFCCC policies are supposed to cater to the least developing countries of the global south in terms of reducing carbon emissions and giving damages for the loss we're facing in terms of not reaching the developing goals we're supposed to reach due to increase in problems due to climate change. So, for example, the Industrial Revolution that kick-started UK's development happened a long time back. So in terms of just comparing those two particular scenarios, for Bangladesh, we are much behind in terms of developing our nation, and climate change is just adding to that problem. So in terms of representation, there is a network of countries with similar problems, and we do learn from each other.
That's wonderful. Now, I'm just wondering, you said you're collaborating with some people from the United Kingdom. There was a fellow I saw on one of your Facebook Zoom webinars. This was on yesterday? July 2nd. And his name is Terry Cannon. He was the senior visiting lecturer in the Department of Geography from King's College London. And he's a development studies specialist based at the Institute of Development Studies. And he said in the webinar, he said decolonization must take place. So, and I was thinking, for example, arranging my time to talk to you, it's like based on the Greenwich Mean Time, the Universal Time, UT. And it's in UK, it's in England. I'm thinking the whole world's time is based on, and the whole world we're kind of forced to use the calendar, January to December. And there's so many things that are leftovers from the British Empire. Like even my province is called British Columbia. We have banks, we call the Royal Bank of Canada, and a lot of royalty there. So, and what's happening, as you know, the last few hundred years is there's these nations that get super powerful and they become bullies and they kind of leech off the resources of smaller nations. But of course, UK is not strong as they were, but it's other nations, right? The big ones usually that are like flexing their muscles, right? So I know Bangladesh is a smaller country with a big population for that small land base, but I'm just wondering that when Terry Cannon said decolonization must take place, do you think there's anything that needs to be done? I mean, you're already collaborating with some people in the United Kingdom, but do you think, like, apart from them, there's like systems or things that can change that would help you in your battle against climate change?
I think
it's a loaded question.
it's a bit complicated question, but I think when Terry Cannon mentioned that particular point, he was talking in terms of environmental justice or in terms of climate justice, for example. An example I can give is the poor population in Atlanta, Georgia, Atlanta, who are the minority are African Americans, and they don't get most of the provisions they're supposed to get in terms of amenities in the city. And these people are facing different hazards, and it's a racial problem there. And in terms of Bangladesh as well, that notion of a former colony of the British Empire, that sentiment still exists, and it affects our thinking process. It affects our everyday lives in terms of the colonizer hangover, which is a common jargon that's been used nowadays, and we do feel that it's still there. And all of our, it's my personal opinion, maybe Sumaiya and Nafis has a different opinion in terms of that, but in my personal opinion, I think most people cater to Western ideology, and we try to impress the Western culture in terms of everything we do, and that usually diverts us from our own culture. And I think in terms, how does that affect climate change impacts or development per se? We do have local knowledge. We have a huge, rich history of local knowledge we're using to tackle climate change. We necessarily don't need to look into the global north or the UK to seek ideas, and local ideas do help better in adapting to different problems. I think that's what he meant, that can we come out of that thinking process and look into ideas that already exist, positive ideas that already exist in our country.
So you can go at ground level in Bangladesh and gather information on how to deal with this, you think, from within the culture, within the history, within the living memories of all the people?
Yes, of course, because, Bangladesh used to be the most vulnerable country in the world. I mean, we still are, but we are on our way to becoming the most resilient country, and we are actively going up the learning curve on how to deal with this problem very fast. With the sea level rise by just 1 meter, almost 17% of the country would be underwater by 2050. And while the rest of the world is still debating climate change, Bangladesh is adapting to this warmer and more violent weather, less predictable weather condition. Because for us it is a matter of absolute survival. Like storms, cyclones, it is a matter of day-to-day lives for the people of the coastal areas, where the global north is thinking about, when we might be hit by a cyclone. For people of Bangladesh, it is more like when it will come again, because it is a matter of day-to-day life. So yeah, in fact, in matters of adapting to climate change, they should be learning from us, because we have been fighting it, we have been living with it, and we have a lot of knowledge to share with them on adaptation and on resilience. And I think Bangladesh is actively doing that.
Okay. I'm just going to skip to this question here, where it's basically, do you think in your culture you have like a healthier, more realistic, we could probably say a more scientific view of nature? Like, I'm talking about your culture pre-British Empire, like in that deep historical culture. Do you think there's more respect for nature in there?
Sumaiya, do you want to answer that?
Sundarban, the largest mangrove forest, a big chunk of it is in our part of Bangladesh. Sundarban has been working as a protective shield for us, for helping us fighting these deadly cyclones which I've just said, it's a matter of day-to-day lives. So the importance of Sundarban, the importance of protecting the Sundarban, it has been, I mean, deep-rooted in the mind of the people, in the mind of the local people. They do realize and they are thankful for the what should I say? They are
the existing of the forest resources there. It just doesn't help protect the people, the coastal people, from cyclones or sea level rise. It also gives vital resources to the people as well, and it's a blend of culture there. It's a predominated Muslim population, but at the same time there are Hindu population there as well, and both assimilate and they pray to a goddess there to protect them against such problems. So it's a blend of culture there as well. So it's a very important thing as our country. We look into our natural resources, and there is a cultural blend associated with it in terms of the rivers as well.
Okay, but yes, of course, adding to that, with industrialization and with urbanization, a lot of this heritage and the cultural knowledge has been lost or on the verge of being lost. So I would say that still a lot of work is there which could be done, or there is a scope of potential work that can be done to protect this cultural and the indigenous knowledges that are prevailing among the people.
Mm-hmm. I talked to a First Nations lady, that's basically indigenous in Canada. It was like a few days ago. And she was saying that, if we all look at nature and listen to nature and don't look at land as something that you can just buy and sell, and you look at the trees, you look at the birds, you look at the land as something that is you're part of. It's not you're separate from it, but you're part of it. So it's not this land. You see a forest. Oh, which trees can I cut down? Oh, you see some land. Oh, what can I build on it? But you have a little bit more respect. And you say to yourself, hey, I need air to breathe. I need a place to live. And we are partners with nature rather than, I'm going to slam my fist on the table and I'm going to take over this land. So, it's just talking about a different attitude. And I know that Bangladesh had to put up with colonization. And I think that came with it is this whole idea where land is a commodity. It's not something precious like your mother who gives you life. So, I'm sure your country, you're probably easier to switch over to a more healthy, nature-based attitude. So,
yeah, well, in general, the mindset of people is that, in general, that we only think about the services that nature or in general the ecosystem provides to us humans. But it is also important that we consider to address the reciprocal relationship, like you have just said, between humans and ecosystem. There is a term called services to ecosystem, which addresses, in fact, this reciprocal relationship that is shared between humans and the ecosystem, and it restates the certain aspects by which humans provide services to enhancing this ecosystem. And this reciprocal relationship in the indigenous and the traditional rural community in the Sundarban, or maybe in the Chittagong hill tracts, which is also a very large part of Bangladesh, is very fundamental, that this reciprocal relationship is addressed, and these knowledges need to be included and managed within the environmental decision making, for the overall country.
Okay.
And then something you want to add on it?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think the Ostrom principles that look into governing the commons. The commons is a big thing. In terms of resources for our country, there's so many different types of resources in our country and so many different indigenous knowledge that exist. So in terms of learning from our indigenous communities, we do learn a lot in terms of sharing resources amongst ourselves. And yeah, as Sumaiya mentioned that, yeah, we do have a certain obligation we need to give back to our natural resources in terms of paying our respect to our country.
Mm-hmm. So another idea about indigenous peoples is the concept of being a nomad. Because where I live here in British Columbia, Canada, the First Nations people before the Europeans came, they would have like 3 villages. And say summer they would go and stay in a village and they take their canoes and they go to village number 2 and then they take their canoes and go to village number 3. That's a nice life, right? You have 3 different places. And they would go according to the season. So I know much of the world was like that. People had to leave by the rhythms of nature. And then we all settled down, most of us. Mm-hmm. But now with climate change, maybe that concept of being a nomad, it has to be taken up and it has to be, it's like reskilling, retooling so that it's for survival, right? We say that, oh, this piece of land, I have to stay here no matter what. Well, that's just being stubborn because in world history, being a nomad was kind of normal. So I'm just wondering if you think that there's going to be a point where this concept is going to have to be enhanced and enlarged so that people can survive.
Yeah, I think you can see the examples already. You're seeing large group of people taking the boat and traveling to different countries because they are being forced to move. But at the same time, due to legal binding in terms of drawing up a border, if I use an example in South Asia, Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan was one big country before the partition, right? So it became 3 different countries, but the people's mindset, the culture, seasons in some parts of the 2 countries are more or less the same, and we do share the same resources in terms of the rivers that originates in the Himalayas. Just because there's a border and just because people might have to move, these scenarios have changed from that nomadic time to the current status quo. Like people from Bangladesh just can't move to India because his or her resources are being depleted due to climate change. And that creates a lot of legal problems nowadays. We have fancy jargon such as being stateless or being, those people become refugees, but those people were resource rich in the country they were being forced to live. They had respect. They had, as human beings, they had rights which the people of the other country have, right? So just because we have borders, that this particular things are becoming problem. And I think moving forward, that the concept of being nomads and learning from the indigenous community of Canada, I think it's a good example. I think things need to change in the near future.
Yeah, I think the whole
adding to it, sorry to interrupt. Adding to it on a local scale, well, Adnan has talked about broader legal issues with borders and cross-country refugees and complex stuff. Okay, on a local scale, we already see, cases of seasonal migration because when there is a livelihood opportunity that arises seasonally, like for example, in a particular season of fishing. This is something we have seen in Mongla as well during our research, that during the fishing activity when people from the outskirt areas of Mongla, they come to Mongla for this particular time period of 3 to 4 months, they work there and they go back. In fact, there are cases where they come with their family, their children, And after this fishing season is over, they go back to their original destination. Well, this seasonal migration generally happens from the nearby towns of Mongla.
Yeah, and just to add to it, and this particular findings prompted like our main supervisor for this project. His name is Shardar Shofikul Alam. He's looking after this project. It was his brainchild, his idea to look into whether Mongla can be chosen as a climate-friendly city for the future. And we do have government mandates to look into reaching our adaptation goal. So we're looking into this particular idea that whether we can feed into those adaptation goals in the future.
Okay, that's wonderful. Now, I'm just wondering, do you think there's going to be a day where everybody has to pack up and leave and everybody go up to Russia, assuming that their government will let you in, or everybody will have to go up to the Scandinavian countries, everybody will have to go up to Canada, right? Because everywhere's too hot. That's like one of those Mad Max post-apocalyptic movies, right? Worst case scenario. But, I mean, has that ever crossed your mind?
That's happening. That's happening in Canada right now. I think the Trudeau government mentioned that Canada doesn't ethically need to allow climate migrants or refugees coming into Canada and to resettle them. But people are going to countries like Canada through their immigration process, and especially people from Haiti, for example. They travel to Canada after earthquake. So just looking into different hazards that has been happening around the world, I think that's a possibility in the near future. But again, in terms of whether Canada can cater to those people, that's a different question. Like, do you have livable city, for example, or do you have the resources to look after those people who are leaving everything behind and moving to those cities and starting from scratch? In my experience in Waterloo, I've met a couple of them who were professors in their original country, but now they're working in Walmart or in a pizza store because they lost everything when they moved, right? So can countries like Russia or Canada look after these people in the future? But the question that are people moving? Yes, they are moving if those countries have immigration processes that allow those people to come in.
Yeah, actually, I used to know a lot of Russian people, and it doesn't look like they have an immigration program, but they do, because they're taking a lot of people from the Central Asian countries and any country that had connections with the former Soviet Union. So they're a little bit more open for those people to come in. So I don't know about the Nordic countries because they're all kind of small, but as a big unit, they're probably a little bit better off in the future with climate change. But while the world is, how are we gonna? It's my bedtime in about an hour or so, and how do we sleep at night thinking about this? And for all of you, it's still your weekend. You can kind of enjoy and just forget everything, right? Let's forget about climate change for a few hours, right? So, here's my last question: is like how do you stay mentally at peace, even though you're studying all the scary, scary stuff? What about Nafis? Would you be able to answer that? How do you stay how so you don't go crazy studying all this and getting so worried? How do you keep your mind balanced?
Can I get this question back because I can't catch it.
Okay, I mean, do you get really depressed and sad when you're studying about climate change? Oh my God, what about my children? Yeah, okay.
How would I answer, and Nafis can follow up with it. Climate anxiety is a big thing, and working in the development sector, I think I can answer for everyone that it does get to your mind, mental stability in one point. Like there's so many negativity around this topic, and the people you see suffer due to it. So for me, I do like to read a good book. I take my mind off through Netflix. I do exercise, but that's you can do so much, right? Because you don't get that much of time to take your mind off these problems, because it's part of our everyday life compared to maybe people in Canada. For my time there, most people are still in denial that climate change is happening. And since until those people actually go through those experiences, it's hard to tell. And my friends used to tell me in Canada, relax, let's go for hiking, let's go to the bar, let's do something fun, right? But that's a luxury most people in Bangladesh don't have. It's like a cutthroat life every single day. So, yeah, we do try to distract ourselves, but for my experience, it hardly works for me. I don't know, maybe Nafis has a different answer.
Okay, when I get depressed, depression is a part of life. So I'm trying to resilienting myself against this disaster, because if I think myself as a country, if myself as a country, then disaster is called depression. Is a very much thing that give negativity and harvesting negativity inside of me, and happening core scenario for me. So that's why I'm trying to resilient this kind of things. And usually when I get depressed, I just shifted from the studying to other things. Like I watching several documentaries from Netflix, nature related documentaries. It can be nature related or it can be war related. Usually in this COVID situation, in this lockdown period, and people like me are getting so much depressed, as we all the time we need to remain in the room for all the time. So
cabin fever is a big thing right now.
Yes. So
just staying indoors all the time.
So because we don't have that many good infrastructures. For example, we just can't go to the park or relax somewhere. It's so cluttered in terms of unplanned urbanization. So it really gets difficult to like do something else other than watching a movie or, as Nafis mentioned, documentaries. Yeah.
Laptop has become a part of my life. That's for now. And I'm just all the
time. So how many movies have you watched since March?
Since March, I have counted. I have read around 21 books,
good for you.
Novels, and I have just watched documentaries. And if I open the list, I watched Cosmos, A Space Odyssey, and I have compared it to 3 full anime and two planet related Netflix funded documentaries. It's Planet Earth and Planet Earth 2. And if you ask about movie, I don't count it, because usually I don't count any time is passing in my cabin, because I can't move outside for the COVID situation. So the time isn't variable for me to now. That's the feeling in this COVID situation.
I hope you're exercising, do some push-ups, or I don't know, run around your kitchen or something. So, well, thank you so much, all of you, for being here. And I guess it's your Saturday morning, right? Thank you so much. I really appreciate it for taking the time out of the day. And I don't know about you, but probably speaking English for an hour and 20 minutes gets stressful and tiring, because I speak a couple other languages and it's hard on the brain. So, but you all speak English. Awesome. So thank you so much again. And I really hope that you have a wonderful weekend and the week coming up this month of July. And I hope that you'll get more good news. Yeah, you're doing a great job.
Thank you for giving all of us the opportunity to share our 2 cents on the migration and climate change issues from our country. And hopefully, we will be able to share our knowledge in the future and also learn from your end. Canada is close to my heart. I miss the poutine I miss Tim Hortons, but yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
In the
That's so
future.
awesome. Okay. Well, have a wonderful day and thanks again and take care.
Yeah, you too, then.
You too.
Okay.
Thank
All right.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Okay. Bye. There it is, an insightful interview with the International Center for Climate Change and Development. And thank you, my guests. That was a very, very insightful, precious, and I learned a lot interview. Okay? A little disclaimer here added to the end of every episode. This podcast is meant to be educational and does not try to offer legal, medical, or other specific advice unless otherwise noted. And also the opinions expressed here do not necessarily reflect those of the organizations that the host, me, or guests are part of. So, here as I finish this episode, thanks to all of you precious listeners for tuning in today. Stay safe out there and stay tuned for more. This is Vin Nelson wishing you the best on your journey of surviving and thriving with all that life throws at you. Cheers to you all. Peace out.